What's up, everyone? Tonight we're live with Heather from Fairytail Dragons, and we got Dave here to help me out. How are you both doing tonight?
Good.
Good.
So, Heather, you have worked with a variety of reptiles throughout the years. Why do blue tongue skinks give you an almost reinvigorated passion?
Um, I really enjoy them. I don't know. It's something different for me. Obviously, I've been breeding bearded dragons now. Like this is my 20th season. So the blue tongues, I got my first blue tongue in 2017, as we were talking about. Uh, got just a few. Decided I wanted to raise them up. It's something I always wanted, and I just really enjoyed them. I thought they were fun to work with. I I honestly don't know. I just it's not they I enjoy them. They're fun. They're less labor intensive than the dragons, which is a huge plus. I think they make really good pets. So for my clientele and working with a lot of families and things like that, they fit right in. They're less labor intensive for me, and so I enjoy that. They're more challenging. They definitely, you've got that one shot a year, and if you miss it and they don't go, you're waiting another year. So, with the bearded dragons and some of the other species I work with are far more prolific. So I like that aspect of it, just learning something new. I love the dragons. I'll always have them, but after doing them for 20 years, I mean, you get a little bit like, okay, yeah, what else is there? So I have a number of species that I work with and enjoy. The banana pectinata. Also, I have frill dragons. I'm growing up the Australian water dragons. But the blue tongues have definitely like kind of taken that top spot, the top spot. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with them.
So, initially, did you start them out outside then?
No, so initially when I had them indoors for 2 years. So, and then in 2019, we moved here to this property and started working everything outdoors. So all of my blue tongues, and pretty much all the other species that we keep have been outdoors since 2019.
So then 2020 was your first season breeding them too then also, or did you breed them before that?
No, I did produce them, and I did produce a litter in 2019. So, and then 2020, I had a couple more litters, and then, obviously it's kind of picked up from there. So.
Did they adjust pretty quick to the outside?
Very quickly, yes. For me, outdoor keeping, obviously Ron is extremely experienced in outdoor keeping. It's one of the things that he's known for. For me, it was all brand new. So the first winter, then, that was a very stressful period for me. Watching the temperatures drop, I'd find myself waking up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and looking at the temp, and it just continued to drop. And I'm like, but I mean, everything was fine. And now over the years, getting, understanding weather patterns and understanding kind of like, when I need to cover them, when we vent, how much do we vent, during the winter and during rainy seasons and things like that. I mean, it really feels pretty natural to me now. And I've relaxed about it. Now, when I see the 30s, I don't freak out. I'm just like, all right, we got this, So, whereas before I'd be, more than a little nervous. But Ron had a lot of experience with that. So obviously I learned from one of the best as far as outdoor keeping.
So right now they're in 6x3x3s on a lot of them, right?
So right now I'm actually running a number of different enclosures, and as the bearded dragons, as I bring those numbers down a little bit more, and then we have plans to expand enclosures for the blue tongues. Right now, I actually have blue tongues and enclosures that are like nearly 6x3, 5 by right around 5x3, 4x4s, 8x4, and 16x4s. So like the Hospitalis are in a 4x16, so they have like tons of room. So the goal, the size that I really like, and that what I really kind of want to move to, because I can, not because you have to, but just because, that's kind of my end goal, is for them to be in 8x4s. So as we kind of transition, so like my 4x4s, I can, break down a wall and create the 8x4s. So using existing enclosures here, then plus, doing some add-on. So, but it's a process. It doesn't all happen overnight. I'm not looking for it to all happen overnight. This is something that I built slowly, that I didn't go and explode on. So, so I like feeling comfortable at every level, and making sure that I'm really enjoying myself. And if I hit a point where I'm just like, okay, that's enough, then back it down, so I'm not overwhelmed.
So other than size, anything else you want to change? Different design, have something to keep the lids up, some rolling conveyor tarps, or
Right, yeah, the 6 mil plastics can be a little bit of a challenge every year. So I mean, there's some of like the original ones, some of the original tubs that we use, the wood tops, those need to be completely refitted. So we'll be doing that this year, and refitting them with aluminum lids. So I mean, we do have some. We do, there's always something to do. There's always work to do. There's always changes to be made. So, and as I move forward with this, I've kind of learned, what I prefer for them, with low level ramps, basking platforms, just kind of what my preferences are. How much leaf litter do I want in there? Because if I have too much leaf litter in there, then the wood roaches get a little carried away, and then I've got, one of my girls will be, getting a little fluff off of all of the free food. So I've kind of figured out exactly how much leaf litter I like to have in a lot of them. And I mean, it's just a process. So, as we go, it's like, okay, well, and we have, let's see, 1, 2, probably 5 different enclosure styles running now. So I've kind of learned what's my favorite, what I like about which each one versus what I don't like about another. So, moving forward, we'll kind of uniform it. I'll make it more uniform as we move forward.
well, in end of the day, the skinks, it's not going to hurt their feelings if it doesn't look perfectly uniform. That's
No,
more
I mean,
for us.
I don't have the kind of funding to be able to go and have, 100 enclosures that are all perfectly matched and built out. So, I mean, we reuse a lot of materials, and, we try to be very smart about that. So we'll break something down, and we're able to use it elsewhere. So biggest thing, obviously, is making sure they're secure, being in the state of Florida. So that's important.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so are each one of these cages for an individual animal, or are you guys doing groups?
No, so everyone is paired for the most part. I have a few that have trios, but most of them are paired. So, okay. We have the occasional one that's living, in and of itself, but for the most part, most of them are paired up.
Okay. And these guys, are you doing any introduction for breeding, or they're just doing what they're doing out there and you're picking them out when they're gravid?
They live together full time. So once I pair somebody up, then that's it, unless I make a swap. If I make a swap, then I usually do it just prior to winter. And then this year I did make a few changes, a few position changes in early January. So.
Okay. Have you seen any off-season breeding habits with these animals, or do you find it's always around the same time, they all go in the same window?
So the Hospitalis that we have right now, we acquired those last year, and she's looking incredibly thick. So I think she's going to go earlier than probably anybody, if hopefully. That's definitely what it's looking like. I mean, she's big right now. She's big. And she's not eating right now. She's cut back on her food, and so fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But most of the time, those that have settled in, once they kind of find their place, they're typically having their litters within, 3 days of the year prior. So it's pretty close. Here I start really seeing, we run a little bit later outdoor here. than if I were to keep indoors. Most of you guys are dropping litters before us. So my litters are usually showing up like the first of them in June. So I run a little bit later. So I'm always joining the party a little bit late, but that's okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, bud.
Now, do you, being you don't have a ton of trios, this might be hard, but do you see more consistent reproduction in the pairs versus the trios?
So right now I really don't have much going on with yeah, there she is. The so right now I only actually have, let's see, seven groups of trios. So and those are all new. Those are all new setups. So I don't know. I can't really give you a gauge right now. So as far as the pairs, their reproduction is pretty consistent. So some of my northerns have gone 3 years back to back. Some of them took a year off. Pair of the easterns took last year off. I'm hoping she'll go this year. So,
Okay. Are you adding anything to the enclosure before they have their babies, or are you able to just go in there and find them all?
no, I just go in and find them all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is I did go ahead and I had, so I have two 16-foot enclosures, 16 by 4s, and they had a larger water base. And so now, since we're in that time, I mean, obviously they're not ready to go yet, but I did go ahead and change out the water bowl. So I'm kind of a little bit more aware of water levels and things like that in case I have a little baby that decides to, find their way to the water bowl. But
Cool. So outside having them live together year round, what percentage of your females do you feel are going for you every year? 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10?
So last year it was about, I'd say right around 65%. So I haven't been doing it long enough to be able to really give you like a true gauge of this is what happens every year. And I'm still like kind of developing and learning the patterns of what happens year over year. Yeah.
Have you noticed anything between raising your babies up to adulthood and breeding them versus buying adults and breeding them based on their cycling? Have you noticed any difference in that, or is it all about the same?
They're all the same. They're all, any of them that I've acquired. It's like once they kind of get online and once they're in the groove, which is about, about 18 months or so, 18 months to 2 years, depending upon when in the year they were acquired, then they're jumping right in line with everybody else. So they're all, dropping within weeks of each other. So.
That's pretty consistent for outdoors. I would have thought with nature that'd be spread out more, but I have no clue on any of that.
Yeah, like the Gigas. So one year they laid, or she's laid. I want to use dragons. She had her babies on the 10th, and then the following year she had them on the 7th. It was like, okay, it's like. So, but yeah, they all seem to line up. I mean, I know when I need to start going out every day and looking for babies. I'm looking for them generally around 2:00 in the afternoon. So is when I start.
I'd be curious to see long term, like say if you have a warmer year, if they go sooner or not, if it changes anything, just something to keep an eye on down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have had some, like last winter. This winter was not cold. We had a pretty warm winter. We didn't really jump down into the 30s very much at all. We had several nights in the 40s, but we were pretty warm. So I'm a little curious to see what happens this year if some of them don't go a little earlier. So find out. This is a good year to kind of test that and see if they stay in line with previous years or yeah,
because I've noticed some will go sooner if they have a little warmer temperature, but being they have multiple options to kind of regulate themselves, it might be that why it's pretty consistent. They're their own thermometer.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like I'm having days where mine aren't in a consistent, stagnant, you're hitting this every day, and then at night we're letting you fall to this. I mean, they're sometimes at night they'll fall into the 60s, sometimes they're going into the 40s, sometimes they're going into the 30s, then they're going back up to the 50s. So it's really kind of, sometimes we'll have a week where we have a lot of cloud cover. Early like in we were getting a lot of cloud cover in like February this year, which is kind of unusual. So, that impacts how warm they're able to get. So it's nature is chaos. So, it just.
Try to control it as best as you can and hope for the best.
I mean, honestly, the only thing that I try to do is mitigate any conditions that could be detrimental to the animal. So, if we're heading into, if we're heading to rainy season, then we're putting up the corrugated plastics over a certain portion of the enclosure to provide additional shade in the summertime, and then also to provide shielding against the additional shielding that we already have for the weather. So, we're using the 6 mil plastics in the winter. And so we're rolling those back and forth according to, what's happening around us. So we're really just we're not trying to control anything necessarily. We're just trying to mitigate any conditions that would fall within outside the parameter that the animal could naturally deal with.
That makes sense.
Do you get many slug outs?
So far, no. Don't jinx me. No.
What are you doing to mark your gravid females? Are you candling? Are you just doing it by body language? How are you marking them once you know for sure?
How am I marking them?
Well, how are you knowing your animals are gravid? Just by going in there at a certain time? Or are you checking them?
I'm not doing any I'm not doing any candling or anything like that, or check any type of imaging or anything like that, if that's what you're asking. So it's just really behavior. It's the weight of the animal, how she's carrying her weight, how she's behaving, how she's basking, where she's basking, how often she's basking, things like that I have a pretty good idea. I mean, I don't have it down to a science yet, just like everybody, no, but really none of us do. But for the most part, I'm getting pretty decent at it. So
cool. What's your diet like? Are you guys using Missouri? You guys, how are you doing diet?
The diet for them is very varied. I offer a lot of variety. So I'm offering, like the babies, for example, are getting primarily gut-loaded bugs, crickets, mealworms, black soldier fly larvae, and the superworms. My older ones, I start introducing, berries, bananas, various fruits and veggies. Pumpkin, squashes. Let's see what else. I do use wellness core. So I use cat, some in the younger ones, and then dog in the olders past year. So it's pretty varied. So I rotate their diet a lot. I don't like to give any of my animals just one thing, because I believe that they pull nutrients of benefit from many type of food types. And so my personal feeling is that I'm limiting them, or I'm potentially making them deficient in something if I'm not offering them a lot of variety. So
now, you might have not just mentioned it. Are you feeding much like organ meat, or adding any like ground poultry or anything like that?
I do offer chicken hearts in rotation. So I do offer them chicken hearts. So I am doing some organ meat, yes.
Okay. Have you ever done beef liver?
I have not done beef liver. I have not.
Why beef liver, Dave?
I believe it was Don Patterson started incorporating their diet probably about 5 or 6 years ago when we were talking. Just something that he always stood by. He likes incorporating organs back into the diet, because a lot of the dog foods that we use don't have organs in them anymore.
Yeah, I do use I do have turkey liver that I've used limits, a little bit, but not a lot. So
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that in January you did rotate some males. Was that during breeding season or just getting ready?
uh, it was just prior to really seeing any activity. Like you can kind of tell with how much they're coming out, how often they're coming out. I know that they're getting ready to go, and so there were some changes that I wanted to make just prior to. So, and pair up some that were not previously paired. So, yeah.
I would assume it would work fine if, like, say you had a lone female in a pit and you wanted to toss a male in while he was in the window. That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Or
Well, I did have some that were living solitary, and so I paired them up. So that went through winter by themselves. So I paired them up, and just made a few flips, some changes, but not much.
Have you noticed any aggression when introducing a new male to a female?
Outdoors, obviously they have a lot more floor space. They've got multi-levels, they have hides, they have tubing, they have a subfloor. So, everybody's able to kind of, it mitigates some of that. So I really don't have too much of that. I did have one male this year that was he's an active breeder. He's definitely like, so, I was monitoring that, and I was like, all right, so we're going to wait through this weekend. We're going good right now. But if he continues with this, then, I'm going to go ahead and separate them. But they settled out and he stopped, and, it wasn't necessary. So I do keep a close eye on everybody just to make sure that there's not too much aggression, or, that there's, there's anything that I see that brings alarm, that I need to act and remove somebody from a situation. So.
And when they're together, like long term, have you had to separate any groups?
Once they're together and they've accepted each other, then I don't. So far, no. That doesn't mean that at some point, that I wouldn't walk out there and be like, okay, you guys have been together 3 years and it's time to separate. It seems like they once they are together, they accept each other pretty well. One of my trios has been together for, I guess, about 6 months now, and they're totally fine. They're like, whatever. So, yeah.
Does it seem like a more tolerate versus like bonded pair?
I don't see any. I only have one pair right now that I actually, when I go to feed, I'm offering 2 different plates because they're a little bit with each other. There's no battle damage or anything, but they can be a little bit aggressive with the food plate. Everybody else seems to, share off of one plate without any issues, which to me is a sign that, we're getting along all right. It's one of the signs. So I haven't really had too much trouble with that. I mean, the biggest thing is offering them space. The biggest thing is offering them options. The biggest, offering them places to go, places to hide, places to get away from each other. So they're not just bound together in a very small space.
What about your Indos? How did you have to do anything different for those, breeding them outside?
Mm-mm. No. Nope.
That's kind of nice.
No, in fact, the Gigas, the pair, they're right next to a pair of Northerns. So, I mean, they get vented exactly the same, covered the same. It's the same system, everything. They're identical. So, yeah. And
do you ever
the last 2 years, huh?
Oh, I was going to say, do you ever speak with other breeders? Because I know Tiki's moved their operation outside compared to using rack systems. I think Ron's still using racks down there, but do you ever go back and forth with these guys? Or you guys all keep to yourselves?
So Tiki's been up here a few times. They checked out our setups, so that's where they had based up some of their setups. And Yoshi was out here too, so he checked out our setups and built based on some recommendations that we had from things that we had experienced. So
Cool.
yeah, I haven't because up until really this last year, the blue tongues was more of a I love them side hobby for me. Then I haven't really reached out to a lot of different breeders. I'm very introverted, and so I don't know a whole lot of people in the community yet, to be honest with you. So I'm sure I'll meet more as this goes along.
Oh, for sure.
I've been for a year, so I mean, I bought my first. I was there when he had his first show, so he was like 14.
Cool.
We were vending the same.
So, it seems like you've been very hands-on. You paid a lot of attention to like body language, your diet. Is there anything that you feel like you've figured out just based on your research and spending time with your animals that maybe other people haven't noticed yet?
Gosh, that's a good question.
We can come back to it as we go.
Yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank on that right now. I can't. And part of that, honestly, is going to be because I haven't spoken in depth with a lot of people in the community. So I haven't had a ton of conversations like I have in, the bearded dragon community or, monitor community or whatever. So I haven't had a lot of those conversations, to be honest with you. I do plan on having some of those conversations because that's how we learn. So, and take it to the next level, and we're able to share information. So, yeah.
What benefits do you see keeping them outside, like other than like, the nice thing that they get to utilize the sun, which is amazing for them?
Yeah, they have the sun. They have a lot more space than I could offer if they were indoors. Let's face it, I wouldn't be able to pull off 8x4s indoors. Even 4x4 would be hard indoors. So they're able to get a lot more space. They're able to, I believe, and something that I noticed with all the species that we keep is when an animal has these, like I've said, a few moments ago, that nature is chaos. So the animals are working their immune systems. The animals are exercising that immune system. They're not in a constant state of spring. They're not at an always perfect stagnant temp. So they're experiencing highs, lows. They're experiencing variability in the weather. They're experiencing windy days, cloudy days, So to me, based on my observations from keeping indoors for many, many years and then keeping outdoors, is it creates a much stronger animal. I've noticed that my blue tongues, when I handle them, they're strong. Like they're strong. They have a lot more muscle development than one that has lived in a rack. So they just do. They're stronger. They're not. They use it. They're moving all day long. So their muscle development is going to be better. So I feel like I'm creating a strong colony with that as well.
No, I've heard some people say like outside colors are better, and I know they pop better, being outside. Do you think it changes the colors though?
Do they pop? Yes. Does it improve the color? I don't think so. I really haven't picked up any major differences in using the bearded dragons, for example, or the blue tongues at all. So it's pretty comparable. I mean, obviously they're going to benefit from the UV, the natural sunlight, so they are receiving that benefit. And that can help with color, but I don't see much difference between that and artificial.
Okay. How are you keeping your babies?
So the babies are actually, so last year, then we acquired 50 of the aquaculture tubs. and those were converted for the baby bearded dragons and the baby blue tongues. So they're being kept in those. So
Okay.
they're in large enclosures outdoors as well. Um, and they are living together. And as they grow and get bigger, then I'm separating them out.
Okay. And I take it you doing like 1 litter per bin, or how have you been doing
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yeah.
1 litter per bin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The litter stays together. And then, as they grow, they're divided off. So, and that's worked out really well. When they have multiple places to hide, when they have, multiple basking platforms, they're not all in competition for one spot. They've done very well. So, and actually, to me, a behavior that to me happens with both the dragons and with the blue tongues, really any species, but I they're not as when an animal lives by itself, when it's living solitary, exactly, then they have a tendency to become little punks a little easier than if they're living more in a community. So siblings that are living in the same enclosures, if they're provided with everything that they need, it doesn't mean that squabbles can't happen, but if they're provided with everything they need and they're not in competition for space, then that helps the socialization process as well. So, like these guys here, for example, that you have on the screen, there's bearded dragons out in the wild. When they hatch, they all basically scatter onto a bush and they all choose their own stick. So, all of these animals at night, for example, will go onto their own little individual stick, their own little place, and that's where they sleep. That's where they feel secure. So, and there's no competition really because they all have their own space. So there's not just one branch that's being provided, there's many branches and they all have access to the sun. And there's many branches that are offered in the shade so that nobody's in competition with each other. So dragons nip and fight due to nervousness. That's the main reason why you have injuries. That's why most new keepers, most new dragon breeders have so many problems with nips. They think that it's a food issue, and it's not a food issue. It's a nervousness issue. It's competition for the same spot. And so if you provide a lot of spaces so that everybody is able to find their own position, then that calms everybody down, and you don't have that nervousness and you don't have as much competition, and everybody's able to commingle and get along. So.
Okay, cool. That's something when I saw you guys at Tinley, you were mentioning about giving bearded dragons perches, the babies perches, kind of give them a little space to get away from each other. I don't think I've seen many people with bearded dragons that have done anything like that before.
So those blue tubs that he just had up, those are approximately 5x3. I load them up with branches. So they're able to find their own spot wherever they want. There's no competition. Nobody has to stack. Nobody has to, be pushed out of the way. And they're not nervous. Does that mean that something never happens? No. I mean, I do get the occasional little nip, but usually it's more to one of them dive bombing and going for a cricket and they miss and hit the tail end of somebody's little toe, or the tail end of the very tip of their tail or something. It's very minor, and nothing that couldn't happen by just using a piece of tile or something like that, clipping on a piece of tile when they're rounding the corner or whatever. So but yeah, they do very, very well that way. And that was the fourth design here for outdoor for the babies. So for the baby dragons. And then it was beautiful. It's perfect. I love it. So, and then I've kind of created that for the baby blue tongues too.
Oh, cool.
Long term, are you going to try to keep all babies outside?
So the baby dragons, if I have any in off season, they're indoors. But during season, from spring on until November, they're outside. So, but the blue tongues, all of the blue tongues that were, like I only had 2 enclosures outside that just weren't fitted exactly like I wanted to handle winter temps. So those 2 tubs, when we hit lower temperatures this winter, then I did pull those and I brought them in just for the night. But other than that, all the blue tongues were outdoors this year.
How did the toffee blue tongues do at Tinley?
There's a lot of interest in them. They're yearlings, so what I was asking for them was a little bit more than what I will ask for babies if I produce them again this year, which I would hopefully do. So a lot of interest, but nobody pulled the trigger. So, I mean, probably a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the economy isn't exactly like rocking right now. So that makes it a little bit more challenging because they aren't, they're not inexpensive. And then they're crosses. So of course that's something that some people are, a lot of people are very excited about, and some are still a little bit, nervous about, I think, as well, to be honest with you.
Okay. For the patternless project, not to get into all your breeding plans, but you guys were adding a little bit to that too. Like you guys had planned on using that as one of your staple animals, or at least projects.
Am I going to use it as a staple?
Well, I guess what I mean is like you're mixing into other stuff now. You're not going to keep on just making patternless. You're going to work on breeding other colors into it, some other mutations. You're going to progress with that project.
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
Yes. Are you mainly holding everything back right now? I mean, have you guys been doing much selling the last couple of years?
So, the original patternless came to me on breeding loan. So those were obviously split with the owner of those animals. So those animals, the splits went to him each year. And then I kept mine to grow out for my own colony. So this was the first time that I had even offered the toffees. I've never had them online, the patternless. I've never offered them online. We just decided to take a couple of them to Tenley, and if they didn't sell, no big deal. Like they'll produce next year. Wasn't really concerned about it. I just thought I'd go ahead and take some because I have, I do have some to work with here. So already that are breeding now that I produced in 2022. And then also the originals that I got in on breeding loan in late 2020. So.
Okay. When did you guys make the decision to change the name of the project?
About 6 months ago, I guess, because they're not. I mean, they are patternless, but they're not entirely patternless. Just decided that toffee was appropriate for that specific animal.
Does the color change?
Huh?
Does the color on it change at all?
No. I mean, the belly on them is very pink, if you notice in some of the photos. And then they have the bar running down the back on either side most of the time, not 100% of the time. And then I had the hypos too. So we'll see. I have one hypo het for patternless that I produced in 2022, and I paired him up this year. So we'll see if he goes or not. I paired him to a patternless. So they would be either visual patternless, or they would, het for hypo or double hets. So.
Cool.
Now, when I asked on the color, though, like I guess from a polygenic standpoint, can you like make it more of a orange patternless? Does it seem, or not really?
There is some variability in the color, but it's pretty consistent so far. But to be honest with you, I haven't really taken that. I haven't pulled color into it yet. I haven't really had the time to take those steps yet. So obviously being blue tongues, it's a much slower process than, like, for example, when I'm plugging stuff in for bearded dragons or some of the other species I work with, that, the turn to see results and see what happens is much faster. The blue tongues, it's such a slower path, but So I don't know the answer to that yet. So I know that we do have one here that is that it's a hypo that's quite bright, but how much color you can infuse or remove. I personally don't know the answer to that yet. I'm sure somebody out there does know probably, but I do not.
Okay. I sadly don't have the picture, but there was a couple Asian guys at a past Tinley, and we had started discussing the patternless project, and he had showed me pictures on the phone of what he'd been doing with it. And he had some absolutely vibrant looking animals, some of the deepest oranges you've seen. So it does look like that can be lime bred. I can't for the life of me remember who that guy was, though.
Yeah, I believe that they can be based on what I've seen here. But and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what I can do with that. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
So this might be silly, but we talked about I have a couple of those animals here myself, and we were talking, like you said, they're not completely patternless. They almost have like a side stripe. As I started staring at them, I was kind of almost wondering it might have been a dumb idea, but to maybe put some of the darker lineage in there, see if you can maybe make that stripe a little bolder over time. Now, I didn't commit to that because I have very few dark females I was willing to put into that project.
Right.
But I think next year that's going to be one of the directions I go. Like I said, I haven't put a lot of time into the project, but I let the male see about 4 females this year, and that's the first time he's seen anything outside of a patternless female. So fingers crossed. I haven't been able to get the female I've had to reproduce ever. I've had her for about 9 years. It'd be interesting to see if maybe the problem was in the female. Maybe I'm going to find out this year the problem was in the male. But, I really do like the project. I do think there's potential there. And like I said, I went sunrise, sunset. I went some of our better reds. I kind of went all different directions.
Oh yeah, no, the potential that they could be potentially quite striking. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I mean, I've literally got 20 years worth of work here, sitting here. It's just it's going to take time to develop it and plug it all in, and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, no, I've been saying for a little while too, and I'm sure you realized it, but you really came in at a great time for blue tongues. Projects really started like building in a positive direction around 17.
Oop, you lagged.
You there, Dave? Well, while Dave's frozen, you produced this one.
Yes.
What about, does this one seem reproducible, and color-wise, does it change at all?
So those came out of my classic Northerns, and I produced them 2 years back to back. One I produced, and then the following year I named her Oddball, and then the following year I produced 7 more out of 2 different pairings. But the pairings, there is a related sibling between the 2. So I haven't plugged color into them yet. I did go ahead and hold back all of the empty backs. I'm calling them Kit Kats. I did go ahead and hold them all back so that I can plug them into color and see how far I can take that as well. So that's another project I'm pretty excited about. Yeah.
I mean, that was a standout one. I think Adam Chesley showed me that as soon as he had saw it. I've seen kind of things that look like that, but never so high expression, like thinner stripes down the back, but that broad I've never seen before.
So the parents of each of the, one parent from each of the pairing has an aberrant pattern on the back, so it's kind of broken already, and then this popped out. So, yeah, so I have, let's see, I have the one from the 1 year, and then last year, so that was 2022, Oddball, and then I'd say 5 of them are just, of the 7 that I kept, are just as striking as Oddball. So as far as like, almost a full empty bag. So
cool. Yeah, I definitely love that because again, it's very different. It'd be interesting to see how you guys build on that and what kind of color you can get into the back, or if there's always going to be a little bit of a fade.
Right. I think red would be quite, yeah. I think the red's.
I think red everything, to be honest with you.
What's that?
Oh, I said red for everything, in my opinion. I love the red.
I know, right? I do too.
are you going to pair any together this year to see if it's maybe there's a super or if it's just kind of that's all it can?
Next season I will, yes.
Okay.
So
Cool. If you had to guess, how many different maybe mutations are you playing with over there?
how many? Let's see. There's the Kit Kats, the empty back, the patternless, the hypos, the albinos, the melanistic. I don't think I'm missing anybody.
Okay, cool. Oh,
Any
you guys.
Xanthic?
Oh, and then I have yeah, those are the mutations that I have.
You guys have you guys have an Erie and Jaya combo or something over there? Something like a
The
pinkish
bubblegums.
type of.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
bubble. I knew I was forgetting somebody.
yeah. I think I saw that original animal popped up. It might have been about 6-7 years ago. I'm sure you remember who had it, clearly, but that was something I even thought about going after, and I don't do a whole lot with those.
Yeah, so the pair of my original pair, I actually got those. I acquired them from Barrera in 2022, and then they produced for me last year, and then I have them obviously paired up now, and I've since acquired another that is quite similar. So we'll see what happens with that one, but I acquired that one this year, and so acclimation time and this, that, and the other, I won't really be plugging that one in until next year. So,
Well, with the ones you have, are you mixing those with the albinos or anything this season? Or are you going to produce more first?
not yet, because I just produced them last year. So the bubblegums, the first year I had produced them was last year. So I haven't tried to plug anybody in yet. I'm still building my founding kind of, my hets and my stock. And, I have 21 het albinos, T-negative albinos that I produced last year. So those are growing up now. So all of that, I'll start working that in once everybody's,
If you don't mind me asking, with your albino success that you had, is that with a female albino or was that with male albinos breeding for you?
So I had two albino females that I paired to northern males. One of them was a dark line male, so those have turned out really cool. And then the other was a classic northern. So this year I do have a male that actually seems kind of promising. I do see some breeding scuff on her, so maybe we'll see.
Okay.
I know that the Australians have more success when they kind of bring them indoors and have them in a smaller, more confined area. Honestly, I haven't done that. If they don't go this year, I may try that next year. So the albinos that I have, those came in also as part of that original breeding loan. And they were not, they came in and they were sexed, but some of them were missexed. And then, getting everybody acclimated, they were raised by somebody else. So, once I have albinos on the ground, I do intend on raising them up a little differently, like we have other albino species here on property. So,
and what do you mean by that differently?
Just providing more options for the animal. So when you have sensitive eyes, then you need options to be able to. The animal needs to be able to decide: do I want to be exposing myself to the sun like this? How much of myself do I want to be exposing to the sun? So just offering a lot of shade, offering areas for them to get full sun should they choose to do so, but also making sure they have full shade options as well, full cover options as well. So basically allowing the animal to determine what they need rather than me trying to say, this is what you need. I'm giving them the options and then they're able to choose what's right for that individual animal. So like the eyesight, for example, on the albino, the T-negative nidanoles is fantastic. Ted, which he was, we did sell that project last year, but He was 12 years old, and he had his eyesight. There no issue whatsoever with his eyesight. Very prolific male. So that doesn't mean it would cross into all species, but they're provided a lot of options, a lot of shade, and he grew up from a baby under Ron's care, and his eyesight is spot on. So
cool. One last thing on the albino project. So in your opinion, breeding the dark line northern into that, do you think you're going to get something like a real yellow with like a crazy white contrast? Or are you hoping to get color in it like when they do the melanistic?
I'm hoping to get color. We'll see. We'll see.
Okay. I always kind of wondered that myself.
Huh?
I've kind of always wondered that myself because, with the melanistic project, on the belly and underneath the scales, it almost looks like there is a lot of red pigment already there.
Yes.
And typically in your albinos, your black is going to translate to like a white. But with that, I'd be very curious, especially over time with the development, because those babies don't start out black, they mature black.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, no, I'm not sure, but that is something that I definitely want to see what will happen. I think it'll be interesting.
Of course.
The albinos you have, do they avoid sunlight a lot with their eyes?
So they bask. They do bask early morning. They bask in the evening, much like any of my others do. They'll have a tendency. I have a photo on Instagram actually where they kind of like will nestle themselves into the grass, so they're not like full exposed during the day, but they'll come out and bask middle of the day. But they typically will have like some sort of, they'll provide themselves, a bit of cover for the eyes.
So that's good. Then they kind of do somewhat cryptic basking, at least to protect themselves if needed.
Right. I mean, I will see them out fully exposed, but that not for long periods, obviously. So
now, to prevent confusion on some of the multi-species blue tongues, what's the best way to label them?
just full disclosure, just letting them know what they are, So, I mean, I keep Easterns here. I keep Northerns here that I have no intention of, making the crosses on. But when it comes to the mutations, when it comes to the morphs, then, at the end of the day, it's about producing a really healthy, vibrant animal. And that's my goal, for as a pet, because they're pets. But they will be fully disclosed as far as what they are.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really any different with the green tree, or not the green tree, the carpet python community.
Right.
There's a lot of different mutations from a lot of different carpet pythons. There's some people that talk about their pure Darwin albinos. They want to keep it that way. But then there's people who, I think when it comes to morphs in any species, especially I do a lot of boas too, there's not a lot of people that stick to being a purist because you're not always able to.
Right.
So I think in skinks, it's going to be the same way like we discussed. I think there's going to be the mutation motivated people, and then you're going to have the people that are just going to always want to keep them pure, which I think, for each their own, whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, I mean, I respect both of those, and I completely get it. And there are lines that I absolutely intend on keeping pure. And then but when it comes to the morphs, then, it's not about conservation. It's not about you're creating beautiful animals for pets. But it'll be fully disclosed, just as I have with anything else I've worked with, as to exactly what it is and exactly what the cross is. So
yeah,
you can't control what everybody else does, but I can control what I do.
No, for sure. And, communities really do change when morphs do come into the picture. There's been some species that people worked with for a long time. When we talked to the show, I made a lot of comparisons on the crested gecko market compared to blue tongues, chasing certain line bred traits, the highs and the lows in the community. And you saw the explosion when mutations finally hit there. And, I remember pre-COVID, the Xanthics, I think they were like $2,500. And a lot of crested gecko people kind of hemmed and hawed over it. And then a couple years later, we saw animals selling for tens of thousands of dollars.
It was insane. It was insane. I had no idea that would happen. Like, that was just like, what? It was nuts. It was crazy. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I've told the story a million times, but I was at the Vegas show when that big sale was made on all the Xanthic lily whites and the huge numbers are being thrown around. As soon as those doors opened, like 8 people went running right by my table to the back of the building. Didn't even really understand what was going on until the show was over. I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and that could be only a one-time thing. You never know.
You never know. Well, it kind of did end up
I
being
mean,
a one-time thing.
some of it was driven by COVID, obviously. Some of it was driven by the Asian market had a high desire for that mutation, and they didn't have the numbers. It didn't originate there. So a lot of them were being exported. Like all the ones I produced, nearly all of them were exported. I exported nearly 100% of them. So, I never listed one online. I just had customers that wanted them overseas, and off they went.
So the blue tongue skink market will always be affected because we can't really export or import these, it
Right.
seems.
Mhm.
How do you think that's going to affect us long term? Because the strength of the crested gecko the strength of the crested gecko market in that moment was because of the overseas buyer. Like, do you
Exactly.
think that that's going to have limitations for us, or do you think, seeing there's not many of us working with it, there's still a lot of room for growth in the United States?
I think there's a tremendous amount of room for growth with the blue tongue in the U.S. We have quite a sizable population as it is. The U.S. population is quite sizable. There's not a lot of breeders for blue tongues. I mean, it's pretty minimal. I mean, considering how long the blue tongue has been in the U.S., you would think that there would be a lot of more people working with them than there are, and there's just not. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for growth, both in the pet sector and with new breeders coming on board, and all of us openly exchanging information. The mutations that we have available to us now that we can work with and plug in. Like I said, at the beginning of this, I've got 20 years worth of work right here that I can, that I can create. So, and adding a little bit here and there, some things that I have in mind. So I'm super excited about it, and I think that the blue tongues have not, earned their rightful place as far as in the ranks for pets, because they really do make. They make a good pet. Other than dialing in humidity is, in my personal opinion, sometimes somebody has a little bit of a challenge doing that. But other than that, they really are easier for people to understand and keep, for example, than a bearded dragon. So bearded dragons are far more complicated. And so for whatever reason, they just haven't really taken off as a really popular pet.
Well, they had a small glimpse. When Brian Barczyk went to visit Joe Ball in Australia, he came back and I was hanging out with him a couple weeks later, and he was going on and on about blue tongue skinks, how it could be the next big thing in the United States. And there was a window when he was really talking about a lot on snake bites that I thought a lot of new people were coming in. I thought part of the explosion in the hobby had a little bit to do with him speaking about the species. So the reason I bring that up is, there's not been many people in the skink community that have discussed projects, progression of projects. I went from A to B to C. I think it's a lot of people just aren't informed of what you can do with them, and I think that's the biggest limitation of the species.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because I haven't plugged myself in yet. Like I said, I've been just kind of slowly building this on the side and having fun with it, and not really engaging or plugging into the community. But I don't currently see in the U.S. anyway as much. I'm starting to see it now, especially with your podcast. But an exchange of information, it seems quieter. I see far more information being exchanged and far more, just sharing of ideas and things like that in some of the other sectors of the reptile industry. So hopefully, if that is a thing, and I am right about that, it's not just myself not jumping in, then hopefully that will change, and we can all begin to kind of learn from each other, and because to me, like, I feel like I'm always going to be in a state of learning. Like, I don't know everything there is to know about bearded dragons yet, and I've been doing it for 20 years. I mean, you still learn. Time goes by and you continue to learn. We all learn different things at different times. Some of the things I've experienced have caused me to gain strength in certain areas where you may have gained experience elsewhere in something that I haven't run across yet. So we're able to kind of come together and grow together and build this up together rather than segmented. And I don't know.
No, and I agree with all that. And honestly, I do want to see more people in the community, because when we had the most people doing individual ideas over the last 7 years, when we saw unique things happening, even you with the Kit Kat project, that's something that may have never, ever popped up anywhere. It just took the right person working with the species and doing the right pairings. So, more the merrier, in my opinion. I don't think we've seen not our best, but we've seen some of the best skinks produced because of the amount of new people we came in with new eyes on the species.
Right. Yeah, and I welcome new people into the community. I mean, that's how we all kind of like learn and grow together. And I have a lot of fun with that. And I enjoy sharing information, whatever it is I know. And I enjoy getting information from others too, because I recognize that I don't know everything and I'll never know everything. So.
Yeah, no, I get that.
There are, early on when I got in, I got in end of 17, there were some people sharing information, but you definitely had to search for it a lot, where now it's definitely becoming more open source versus you got to hunt people down and hope they give you the right answer.
Right.
And Dave, I do have a YouTube video on designing projects. I could send it to you. I do have one. It's not the best, but
No,
yeah.
it's fine. I'll watch. I promise. You can quiz me on it after.
What is a better beginner pet, blue tongues or bearded dragons?
Well, I kind of already answered that. I mean, obviously, I'm partial to the bearded dragon because 20 years, but the longer that I keep the blue tongues and the longer that I interact with the blue tongues and the longer that I work with customers and setting up the blue tongues, I'm like, I don't get anywhere near the questions that I do with the bearded dragons. The bearded dragon, there's more of a learning curve. So all of my clients get my cell number, which Ron scolds me for, but all of my clients have my cell number. And they're allowed to text me with any questions that they have, because I'd rather them ask me than try to figure it out online somewhere or go into a group and go somewhere and get the wrong information. Google, I don't want them asking a Google expert. I want them to ask me because I've raised that animal. So, I field a lot more questions initially for the bearded dragon and kind of dialing it all in than I have to do for the blue tongue. The blue tongue, it's just an easier go. I mean, everything, it's not as complicated. So, I mean, they both make really good pets. And like I've said, like the bearded dragon is more like the dog of the reptile industry, and the blue tongue skink is like the cat. So, like, trying to give my customers an idea. They're like, well, what is this like? What's the difference? Because I have a lot of people out there with bearded dragons, and they're interested in blue tongue skinks, and they're just kind of like, okay, well, what's the difference? I'm like, dog, cat, like that's the best thing I could say. So that allows them to be able to relate to it and.
So too, with this species, it's a very pet motivated species. I'd say probably at least 9 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10 skinks that we sell probably are just going into the pet trade.
Right.
So when you make a comment about, giving out personal information, talking to the pet owner, for an animal that costs $250 to $400 for a pet, I don't think that service is any different than whether or not you bred dogs or cats. I think that comes with the territory when you're selling pets.
Right. It does. Yeah. If you're dealing with the general public and you're selling them an animal, you need to be available to answer those questions. So it's not like, in my opinion, it's not like, here's a care sheet, bye, so I need to be there so that if they I've had the same number for 20 years. So, if they need to get a hold of me, I've had people contact me 6 years later and say, my dragon Fluffy is doing this. Can you help me? And so I'm going to help them. So that's, I've seen so many things over the years. I've gotten so many letters from kids. I've seen so many videos of, kids that have really like done their research, families that have done their research, done all the homework to do it right, to set up right, that have sometimes, kids have saved their allowance for a year to buy an animal from me, and have been watching my page and asking questions as I had it. Like, you have to do this right. You have to do this right. And you have to be there to answer the questions once they have that animal in hand. Like, that's a big deal to me. I get goosebumps, but that to me is a big deal, because these kids are the future of our industry. So, these kids, you want them to have a good experience for a number of reasons. Number one, they're emotionally tied to the animal. So you want the animal to be as healthy as possible. The family gets emotionally tied to the animal. And you don't want them to have, some of these kids are super passionate. I mean, I've got girls out there that are out catching everything in the yard, and the parents are like, please don't catch every snake. Like, just ask first, So, I mean, they're really out there, and those kids are the future of this industry. And so I want to make sure that their initial contact with the industry and their experience is positive, and that they don't shy away from it and feel like they've had a bad experience. So, and along that line, I love the longevity of the blue tongue, as far as, how long they can live. To me, that's a big deal, because the bearded dragon, the lifespan is not as long. So,
So, again, comparing our part of the industry to other parts of the industry, back to the comparison on crested geckos, do you think that the evolution of blue tongue skinks will be kind of like the triple X line, let's say, from Pangea? People knew what the parents looked like. They knew about lineage. My buddy Bill up in Buffalo had like a Bieber line Harlequin pinstripe project, and everybody knew they came from Bieber. Like, do you think things like that, where it's going to be about people wanting to buy from certain parents and then truly having lineages and building on that? Like, how do you think, like, the evolution of blue tongues will go with the terminology, let's say?
So I think you're going to have some that want the background on them, and then you're going to have others that don't. I mean, that's just, you're going to have some that are looking for lineage, and then you're going to have others that's not of importance to them. So it just depends. I have customers and clients that I work with the various reptiles I already work with, and some want the lineage and some don't. So that's fine. I'm happy to accommodate them either way. So I did used to do, like, with the dragons, parent picks and things like that. I did that for years. And then we went through a stage where, like, my photos were constantly being stolen. They were being used on other people's websites as their bloodlines. It was like this, that, and the other. And I was like, that's it, and so I haven't done that in quite some time. I probably stopped that about 7 years ago. But
do you think it's worth starting to take pictures? Say you have a super unique orange and red animal that would be worth to start?
No, I don't. It's not, like I said, it's not a matter of like hiding anything or anything along those lines. But when you have, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but we'll just throw this out there because it's coming to my mind. So if you have somebody that purchases a bearded dragon from you, for example, and it's $150, and it's, a nice red line, but it's not like top or whatever. But it's a nice red, got nice conformation, this, that, and the other. Sometimes what happens is, if you show them the parents, if they don't turn out exactly like one or both of the parents, then there's a disappointment there. And it's like, okay, well, with the bearded dragon in particular, you have an extreme amount of variability. So, you're talking about a pair that could pump out, 100 babies in a year or more. So, 60 kind of on average, to give you an idea. So you've got 60 offspring. They're not going to all grow up, develop, and line up to look exactly like mom and dad. So it just kind of, I don't know. It's a lot of extra work. The blue tongues is a little different to me, in that, you're only dealing with one litter a year. So trying to, to provide that to it's just a little different. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, you're not producing 60 offspring from the same pairing. And I don't know. I don't know. It's something
Even
that I'll work out as I go. I'm not at all opposed to showing my pairings. You know, I take pictures of them when they're born every year, and I'm like, here's the mom. You know, so
even then with the blue tongues, those can be pretty variable and look completely different than the parents
exactly,
also.
exactly, absolutely. So imagine that with a bearded dragon when there's like 60 of them or 100 of them. You know, your span of variability is going to be even greater. But yes, absolutely, you're correct. So yeah, I've had somewhere. Where did that come from?
No, for sure. I honestly like doing really dumb, nonsensical pairings sometimes just to see if some kind of shade of color comes out that we've never seen before. You know, Cheryl was mixing like reds with Turner whites with caramels, and it really designed like an entirely new color to like work on.
Right.
So I do like doing things that might not make sense because you're not really sure what's going to pop out, and you may find a new direction worth going on.
Well, and yeah, and I'm coming from the background that I have. I'm used to dealing with color palettes, so I see all of that. So I'm very much in line with that,
Yeah.
and like to do things like that as well.
No, that's cool. And you know, another thing I've really loved about skink breeding that I've noticed is that whereas some species you're talking second, third, fourth generation before you really get to where you want to go, man, after just a couple of generations of teasing around with these things, it's almost like you've got to the ceiling on what you could do with them. Some of our reds have become red a lot faster than I thought we would when it came to quality, just with simple changes that we've made. But no, like I said, I think truthfully that the skinks are about to pop off. You know, I think we had that little peak in the market 7 years ago with a lot of people getting in. I think things have steadied out now, and you know, I always have a lot of faith in the hobby. You know, we're talking bad economy. Well, that's always happened in this hobby. It's always affected us in some ways. But I've always found that the years in the hobby where the economy is bad, it's when people are holding back more to improve on what they're doing and improve on their collection. So when things pick up again, it's amazing. So
Right.
personally, I think in about a year or two, again, with the right information being put out there and everything else, I have a lot of hope for sinks for the same reason you do. I've always made the comment they're better alternatives than bearded dragons. They make great pets, less health issues, less, I mean, just overall an easier species.
They're less
So,
expensive to maintain on like a weekly, monthly basis too. The food costs are far more reasonable. So, you know, somebody that has a single pet trying to get like healthy bugs for a bearded dragon is very expensive, you know, because the box stores, most of them, you know, they're almost nearly dead. The quality of bug just isn't that great. So a lot of times they're ordering it online, they're paying shipping charges, this, that, and the other. So, I mean, the blue tongue is just very family friendly for a lot of reasons, including budget, you know, as far as a monthly expense to house and feed the animal.
yep, I agree.
Yeah, especially you could freeze food to spread it out, or you know, and they eat a lot less frequently
There's
than
such a
bearded.
varied diet. Yeah, there's so many options there. It's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm able
I
to
think
take, you know, things that people food in addition to. So
yeah. That's one of the comments I make people too. Like when you have a family come over and they're looking at an animal, you talk about how inquisitive the species is, how they almost interact with you a little bit when you're in the room. And then I always say you don't necessarily need to do bugs. Their diet can be in your cupboard or under your refrigerator. And a lot of people look very surprised when you tell them that because they assume anything lizard is going to need bugs.
right. So, you know, there's some that have an aversion to bugs. Like, you know, some family members have a complete aversion to bugs, and so that fills that gap in as well. That helps out with that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. You know, I mean, you can run a list of, you know, all of the top pets, and they're all going to fall into one of those top positions for a reason. They all offer something different. But yeah, I mean, the blue tongue definitely has not reached its peak at all. I don't believe, and I think there's so many places that there's so many projects, there's so many places that we can go with this, and that the awareness, you know, a lot of people. So when I first started dragons 20 years ago, I'd go in to get greens, for example, and the cashier would be like, "What are you doing with all these greens? Like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know, I raise bearded dragons." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, I raise bearded." What is a bearded dragon? Like, they had no idea. And now if I go in, you know, a lot of stuff I grow here now, but if I go in and I'm picking up greens, carrot, whatever, and they ask me, then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just getting, bearded dragons. Oh my gosh, my cousin has one. I have one. I know you. I saw you, whatever. My aunt got one from you or whatever, so it's completely different. And so I find that with the blue tongues, a lot of people don't know what a blue tongue is. A lot of people have no idea. They've never seen one. They're like, what is that? I have customers that I've been trying to like feature. I post a lot of the bearded dragons, obviously, but I've been trying to feature some of the other species that I keep here more frequently. So it's more of a blend on my social media pages. And I'll have people that contact me that have had a dragon from me, and they're like, what is that? It's beautiful. Like, how's the care for that? Well, tell me more, So, but they've never seen one. They haven't had any exposure. They don't know what it is. So, and that's a common reaction.
Yeah. I kind of look at blue tongues kind of like hognose, especially when it comes to a pet market animal. I don't want to be weird, but I think they're very cute. Again, I love baby blue tongues. I love my adults. I've always
I love their
just it on.
Yeah.
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 Sorry.
A lot of cute animals do good though, and they are a kind of a chunky, cute sausage that you can handle easy, that attracts new.
My daughter calls them little potatoes. So
Yep.
yeah, she really likes them.
So too, at the industry, there was a while there, not that we were overproducing, but like I've kind of felt like on most of this ride of the blue tongue skinks that the industry has almost produced just enough for the demand. There was maybe a couple of years there that the demand outweighed the supply, but for the most part, when you look at what's going on around us, everybody sells out every year. I mean, as of right now, for the amount of people doing this, the demand is perfect. We just want there to be a larger demand within people who want to breed them for the future, because, these projects we're putting years of work into aren't meant for the pet industry. So that's, again, my comments that I feel like we're on the edge of really popping off as a community when people start really seeing what we're working with and, the quality of the animals.
Yeah, and there's a lot of communities within the reptile industry that I think are looking for something new, and a lot of them are watching the blue tongue community. A lot of them are watching the blue tongues right now. A lot of them are, checking out and seeing what's going on with some of the projects. They're certainly keeping an eye on my page and seeing, what has she got going on now? What's next? So there's definitely a lot of interest there from multiple communities within the reptile industry. So, yeah.
Whenever the economy slows down, the species that take the biggest hits are the ones that the most people are working with, whether we're talking about a ball python, a corn snake, crested geckos, bearded dragons. You see a lot of this in those communities where, your Woma pythons, anything a little on the rare side or even not too rare, those tend to stay pretty stable over the years. And I think when the other communities struggle, they want to put their money into things around them that are selling, and that's where things like this, in my opinion, pick up.
Yeah, and part of that too is that the blue tongue is not as it's not as reliable as far as production numbers. Like, you're not a bearded dragon, you're literally at you're going to run almost 100% if you know what you're doing. So the blue tongue is more like the boa constrictor. You're not running at 100%. So that also keeps the numbers, the production numbers down a bit as well.
Do you think that's more of a pro or a con when it comes to new people wanting to work with a challenging species?
I think it depends on the individual that's looking at the project. So to me, I was totally fine with that. I was completely down with that. But to some, they might shy away from that because so the people that are willing to put in the work, the people that are truly interested in the species for all the right reasons, I think they're going to be fine with that. I think they're going to be fine with them not being 100% predictable. I think that's just part of the puzzle. And I think that's okay for them. For somebody who's looking for, a quick turn and burn species that, they can get up running fast and, making money or whatever it is that they see in that, then that blue tongue is going to probably kick their butt, so I don't know. Does that make sense?
it's not for everybody. And, you
No,
know, if it's not meant for you,
it's
you move on to
okay.
something new. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about being somewhat of a more aggressive breeder? Like I've noticed people, some are afraid to get into them because of the horror stories they've heard.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the, that's one of the risks you have to assume when you work with them. You have to understand that that's part of it and be prepared to act if that does happen. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Um,
I mean, all we can do is present the information, and individuals have to decide if the species is right for them. Not every, anybody that's in this industry, all of us know, not every species is going to be the right species for me. Not every species is going to be the right thing for you. So, based on our personalities, how we like to work with things, what our interests are, what our skill levels are, all of this kind of all go into play and formulate, well, is this species right for me to work with, or should I look at something else? I mean, I've had other species that I got and I enjoyed them, but they didn't light up, they didn't light me up with just like, oh, I really, really, really love this. Like, this is what I want to get up every day and run outside and look at and mess with. And what do I want to do this year? What do I want to do next year? So I worked with a lot of species that I enjoyed, but they didn't really, light me up, like the blue tongues do, and some of the other species that I work with. So the blue tongues, I just really enjoy them, and it's really just a matter of, anybody that is in this industry or wanting to get into this industry. Trying different things on for size kind of, and finding out, where you fit and what you really enjoy, and what calls to you. So, like, I always end up with species that are around the size of a blue tongue, a bearded dragon. Like, all the species that I'm keeping now that I really love are around that size. I don't know why. To me, the smaller stuff, I'm just like, and and they're a good size. They still fit into the pet realm. So, the blue tongue, the bearded dragon, the banana pectinata, the Aussie water dragons, and the frills, they all are about the same size. So I don't know why. That just seems to be, that seems to be the size animal that I like to work with.
cool. Probably not coincidental. No, and two, like you said, like we're talking about like challenges with the species. Woman pythons are a good example. Some people can breed them, but their egg success is really down. Sometimes certain species take a little more work. I like all the gateway species, is what I like to say, the ones that kind of get you in the hobby.
Yes.
Your crested geckos, that's your Asia hatch, or your eggs will hatch at room temperature. Your ball pythons are going to breed no matter what. Like, there's a lot of things that kind of get you going. They give you a little bit of confidence. I wouldn't necessarily tell someone to jump in the hobby and just start working with blue tongues.
Right.
I personally think with any species, once you have an understanding, like, you spend a lot of time looking at your animals. You watch what you're doing, you're seeing their behavior. You've learned probably more just from watching them than other people have learned from reading or talking about them. So,
Right.
jump
Oh,
into
for
a
sure.
species. Yeah, if it's not right, move on. But, I say try everything once.
Yeah. No, you are absolutely correct. There are some species that are those entryway that are much easier, and they really are a good starting point to find out, is this something that you really want to do? Is this something that you want to jump into? Do you want to jump into the daily routine of taking care of an animal, and the whole process? And are you able to pick up cues from the animal that something is wrong or that something is right, and and you've got everything on point? So, you start. You do need to. I definitely wouldn't put the blue tongue breeding, right at an entry level. But yeah, but somebody with a little bit of experience, yeah, go for it.
Sure.
Yeah, care and everything overall, I think, especially the Australian ones are really easy. Some people struggle with the Indos. Um, Long term, what percent of your lizards are blue tongues?
So, right now, this year is the first year where I actually have more blue tongues than I have bearded dragons. That's the first time in 20 years, so that was a huge flip. Uh, Next year, I do plan on reducing the bearded dragons again in half from where they are now. Like I said, I'll always have them, but I'll maintain probably, somewhere between 10 and 15 females, 10 and 15 pair. And so the blue tongue will probably be 70% of what I keep, I would say, in the near future is kind of what I'm looking at. So it'll never be 100%. There's other species that I love and enjoy, but 65 to 70%, probably 70%.
Okay. Without fully knowing everything you guys have over there, what do you still want to get your hands on? Like, are you in everything right now? Do you have a little bit of this and that, or where are you at in your collection?
With the blue tongues, I do want to acquire. Kind of goals for this year, if you will, are to acquire a couple more of the IJs. Also, another male Eastern or two. I would like to bring in a little bit more color for the Northerns. Like I picked up some from you this year or last year. So those are kind of, yeah, I mean, there's nothing like major that I'm looking for right now. It's just to bring in and add to a little bit to what I already have. That's kind of what I'm on the lookout for this year.
So if you're successful with the Westerns, what about adding like blotches?
I do like the blotches and I would like to have them. I don't think this is going to be the year to add them, but in a year or two, maybe next year or the following year, then I'll do that. Like I said, I've got so much to work with already right now. And I really kind of want to like dial in everything that I've got, besides just adding in a few to kind of, complete my male female ratio. I'm not really looking to add like a whole lot right now. But over time, I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush for any of it. So I prefer to enjoy every step rather than getting all of the things at once. So,
what about someone that wants to get into breeding, like genetic blue tongues, for example? How would you suggest they approach it?
I mean, to me, anytime I get into breeding, whether there's morphs involved or not, it's just about starting slow. Like I said, for example, when I started with the dragons, I hate going back to that time and time again, but there's 20 years there. So, when I first started acquiring them, I only bred one pair my first year, and I got the hang of it and kind of figured things out. And I was learning things off of one pairing rather than having too much and feeling overwhelmed. And then the following year I had 3 pair, then I had 3 pair the following year, then I jumped to 5 pair and kind of grew from there. So I feel like, number one, always work with what you love, always work with what you like, not what the market is demanding or what you think is necessarily the next big thing, but what do you like? What calls to you and gets you excited and makes you want to get out of bed every morning and go work with that species? What is it that sets your passion and goes, wow, that's awesome, because that's what you're stick with. And that's where you should definitely always start and make like the core of whatever it is you're doing, and start slow. So start off slow, don't take on a whole bunch, because it can get overwhelming really fast. If you're trying to troubleshoot something, it's much easier to troubleshoot and learn from a few pair, 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, and then it is, so yeah. And making your contacts, learning, earning your place, not earning your place in the industry, but being recognized as being somebody that's trustworthy within the industry, people knowing that you are actually, providing a healthy animal, that you stand behind your animals, growing a reputation, developing contacts with others so that you have, wholesale accounts, or that you have a presence in the industry, so that people recognize you and feel comfortable with you. Because unfortunately, I mean, that is part of today, is there's a lot of scamming, there's a lot of scammers. And so, a lot of people have a hard time placing their trust in others, for obvious reasons. So,
Well, another big thing too is I always tell people, and it's pretty much everything you just said, but growing your company organically. Some people initially come in the hobby, they have a little bit of funding, they get a little crazy with the species, and they haven't even built a customer base yet. And they're now trying to produce 50, 100, 200 animals a year. It's nice to slowly get there, get a little name recognition in the community. I find that people that jump in with big numbers usually aren't successful unless they have a line of wholesalers.
they're usually gone within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's a burnout.
They're burned out. So, and the other thing that I will say too is that for me personally, everybody's different, but whenever I can, and obviously some of this animals coming in on breeder loan, those were already adults when I received them. I love to grow up my own animals whenever possible. Like if I have the option to get an animal as a baby or an animal as an adult, I prefer to grow up my own animal. Because I know their complete health history. I know how they were raised. They were raised by me. I know if they ever, fell ill, if there was ever, what their growth rate was like. Was it stagnant? Excuse me. I mean, I like to know every aspect of that animal. And so if I'm buying the animal grown, I have done it, obviously, sometimes with the blue tongues, but like I did with the bubblegums. But whenever I have the option, if given the option between growing one up and buying one as an adult, I personally like to grow my own animals up.
Well, I feel like what I've noticed in the hobby, and I think there's a truth there for all of us, is when you first get in, you got that itch, you want it, and you're willing to take a risk on adults because in your head it's not a risk. I honestly, my most success I've had in the industry is from animals I've raised up from baby to adults.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my consistent breeders. I don't have a lot of horror stories around that. I understand everything is situational and different, but I tell people that a lot of times when I see adults for sale, I think somebody's selling their problems. Why sell something that's healthy, big, and ready to go if maybe, I understand everything's different, but yeah, once you've been in the hobby for a while, you find it takes a little time, but raising your babies up, it's more gratifying.
Right. Absolutely. And they've been raised in your conditions and your microclimate and your environment with your, with your husbandry practices. And I just, I have people that'll contact me every year and they're like, what adults do you have available? What breeding ready to breed adults do you have? And it's just like, I don't have any ready to breed adults available. Like all my bearded dragons that are ready to breed type of thing, that I'm either breeding them or I've retired them. So I just not a huge fan of that.
So I say the same thing with every species I work with. Again, people always reach out wanting something bigger, but once it's breeder size, I put the time in, I want to breed it.
Right.
It's not very often I want to get rid of things that are adults. Again, unless maybe I'm not being successful with them.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I mean, when you're talking about like the bubblegums, for example, I mean, there wasn't an option for me to get them as babies. So, those I did go ahead and pick up. But, and I have picked up some adults or sub-adults. But personally, whenever I can, then I do like to pick up babies and just grow them up myself.
How would you define the bubblegum project? Like that color tone, like what can you even compare that to in another species?
So they remind me of the tegus, the albino tegu project. So they were highly variable in color. Some of them are like purple, some of them are more pinky red, some of them were more orange. So that's what they remind me of. So they're a T positive. I purchased them as T positives. So but they're highly variable. They're highly variable. So the litter that, and I don't really know how to define them yet beyond that right now because I have very limited. They were available. I like them. You know, I decided that I wanted to acquire them. I produced them last year, and so we're too soon in the project for me to be able to act like an expert on it and go, oh yeah, because I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but the ones that I produced last year are growing nicely. They're really beautiful, and we'll just see what happens.
Cool. Cool. Do you ever show pictures of them along the way? I know I've seen some older pictures.
I posted they're in shed right now. One of them just popped out of shed yesterday, so I was kind of waiting for all of them to shed out. You know, after kind of like coming into spring, and you know everybody starts getting more active and so on to take updated photos. I did take a photo of one of them. He was in like one of the Foursquare photos. Yeah, that one's an older one. That's an older photo, but that's one of them.
I just happened to randomly find that one quick.
Yeah, if you look like around the neck, they have a lot of purple. Initially, one of them was born with quite a bit of purple in the bands. So I'm waiting for that one to shed out right now. See what that one looks like now that we're, you know, once spring rolls around, when you're in a true, you know, when all of your animals are going through the true, like all 4 seasons, you see differences, and you know you see the true like slow down in growth rate, and then you hit spring and then everybody's like boom. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, again, that was always a standout animal.
What's
I'm
that?
sorry, go ahead. Oh,
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, I just remember the early post that Mike Pereira posted of those, and he was just kind of holding it in his hand, and like I had never seen anything like that. I loved it. I didn't know what to compare it to. I didn't know if you thought it could be some kind of like line of albinoism, like I don't know, lavender hognose or anything like that. Just that's something too. Is we guess.
What's that?
Oh, I said that's the hard thing about these genetics. A lot of times we're guessing. Like, we read the definition and we hope.
Yeah, so I'm not going to slap I haven't had them long enough and been working with them long enough to really, I have one litter to be able to, define all. So I don't like doing that. But yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of purple in them. They're pretty interesting and they're beautiful. And like I said, they're definitely highly variable, much like the tegus, the albino tegus were. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, see the one at the top right there, that's one of the toffees, the patternless. You can see the color change at the band there. And then the ivory to the left, and then the hypo is on the bottom.
Oh, that's the hypo on the bottom. Okay, I wasn't sure which one that one was.
Yeah, that one's a hypo het patternless.
Okay.
Would you would you take that bubble gum, or it's bubble gum, right?
Yes.
Would you take that into the patternless project?
Yes.
I'm assuming that's your plan. There's already a little bit there. I mean, why not go that route,
Exactly. So I'm waiting for, so yeah, the projects around here, well, I mean, I've got some stuff that I'm looking forward to. We'll see, but 2025 is when, I really be able to start plugging some things in. So, like I said, it's a process, the blue tongues don't get it all overnight, but yes, that is definitely one of the things I intend on doing. So.
Oh, for sure. Go ahead, bud.
Well, and comparing it to like the T plus and the skinkoides in Australia, those are pretty variable. So that would make sense that being a T plus in the IJs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, again, talking hybrids, how much do you think it would be frowned upon if you put bubblegum into northern projects in the future? A cheat code to make a T positive northern.
So again, with the morphs, I mean, everybody's got to do whatever they feel they need to do. For me, like I said before, I mean, when it comes to the morphs, when it comes to the mutations, I fully intend on making the crosses. They're mutations, they're crosses. I'm creating beautiful pets. So I already have the patternless, which are an IJ Northern cross already. So You know, will I take the bubble gums into a northern? Yes. Well,
Yeah. Well, I told you, yeah, we discussed I have that aneurystic project here on loan that is a IJ Northern Cross. My intention has been to put it into the patternless project. I don't really see any reason to put more Northern blood into that, in all honesty. But I would love to maybe make some kind of silver bullet or some kind of animal with that in the future.
right.
But I'm not sure I'd want to take it back to the Northerns yet or put more Northern blood into that, because I wouldn't know how to improve on an Xanthic project other than, again, maybe putting the dark lineage stuff in there and just trying to create more black pigment with a little bit of gray fighting through, which,
Yeah.
in all honesty, you already get with a lot of the black Northerns.
Right. Yeah. If I look at a project, whatever the mutation is, and I think that it'll be of benefit to the health of the animal, or the beauty of the mutation without negatively impacting the health of the animal, then I will do that. So. And like I said, I mean, I have other lines that I'll run pure, and they will be disclosed. And there's going to be people out there that absolutely love that, and there'll be people out there that are not in agreement with that, and that's okay. We don't all have to agree on the way that we create our own projects. You have to go in the direction that you feel is right for you, and work with what you like to work with. So, I did make the cross with the albinos into the northerns because that needed to happen. So, and they've done very well. They're doing great. So,
I don't know if it's a rude thing to say, but like you mentioned too, our obligation is to our customer and not necessarily to our competition. I'm all about making a healthy animal, and there's been a lot of discussions in Australia that the melanistics and the albinos do better when you put northern blood into them. So again, like you said, it's a disservice to the people buying from you if you're not trying to put the healthiest animal possible.
right. I mean, what is the point of working with your mutation if you continuously have no outcome or a weak outcome? What is the point? It's dead end. Do you want to sell an animal to somebody that is weak? Do you want to sell an animal to somebody that is not that you don't have 100% confidence that is going to go out there and live its best life and have a long, healthy life? Do you want to produce something that is going to be riddled with problems? Absolutely not. So when it comes to mutation, in my opinion, it's about creating the healthiest animal possible. And so some of those crosses are going to have to be made in order to, allow that to happen. And particularly since we're kind of locked in with whatever we have in the U.S. right now, as it stands right now, we can't pull in things from everywhere else. We're not able to bring it all in. So we're going to have to work with what's here. And you want to keep everything here as healthy and viable as possible. So I haven't really seen much work done with the T-negative albino in the U.S. Like I don't see much out there. There's not much out there. On occasion, I see an animal up on Morphmarket that is an adult, and then usually it's a male, and that's it. I don't see too much in circulation. I don't really hear too much about there being any hets out there. Like I don't hear a lot of anything. Now I realize that there's collections out there that not everybody's aware of. Not everybody shows what they have, but I just don't see a lot out there. So.
No, and again, every community is going to be different, but the reality is that, again, you have a service to your customers. And honestly, when it comes to this mutation thing, I made the comment about carpet python community, even like the boa locality, like the Guyana and Suriname guys, they don't really care for a mutation. They care more about lineage. So, you can't really appease everybody. There's a lot of different directions. And I think the reality is that I think this community shook up so many people that we all tiptoe on what we want to say. And I think there's a truth there. But, I see a lot less people in the community now and a lot of new people coming in that, again, are going in a different direction that I think is going to be a positive for the community overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think overall, a lot of those mutations, we're not 100% sure if they're even pure as it is. A lot of those got crossed before they
I
got here.
Yeah, looking at some of my T negatives, I feel like they're already crosses. So there's a couple of them that I look at them and I'm like, that's a cross already before it even, before it came to me. So I just took them back to a northern, you know. So, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to do the same thing with the melanistic too. So the melanistic, there's some work that needs to be done there as well. And so, yeah.
No, for sure. So you had mentioned you did listen to the conversation we had with Roger a few weeks ago. He had mentioned that he believed that a lot of the ivory, northern white, whatever you want to call this, may have had some Eastern incorporated into the project
Yes.
early on.
Yes.
I wonder how that's going to change the mindset of breeders that thought maybe they were buying a northern mutation.
Right. Yeah. Because even when I received my first one, I looked at it and I thought it resembled more the build of an Eastern, and it was invoiced to me as a Northern, and I was just like, and then of course, come to find out that looks like most of them are crosses. So I'm fine with the cross as long as it's a healthy animal.
So I've noticed with a few breeders that got that project that they said their animals were staying smaller and they thought that maybe it was an inbreeding issue, but the small side could be because of the amount of or Eastern blood they have in them.
Correct.
Maybe. Yeah.
They have a more slender build. So they're just not as, barrel like, if you will, as the Northerns. So they're more in line with the build structurally of the Eastern. I have 4 of them, and they all structurally, for the 4 that I have more of a structure of an Eastern in my, so.
Yeah.
But I took one to a Northern to hopefully get hets. Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, you do what you can do with what you got. I mean, like I said, I had always been thinking that the Ivory Project would have been a pure northern. I wouldn't have understood why that would have ever needed to be crossed out in the first place. But again, it sounds like more than likely that's just not the case.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there are some. It sounds like there are some out there. Alex, I think you have one, right? That you believe to be pure northern.
Yes, but it is smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and we thought that could have been inbreeding. He got it imported from China, not so it's different than the ivories, but I guess I can't be 100%.
Yeah. Well, I don't think any of us can really be 100% about anything in the skin community because, even talking to old school guys, things were labeled skunk. And we talked about this. It was always skinks on the table. Nobody really separated by Northerns. Nobody really separated by IJs. There's been mysterious things that have popped up here that are unable to do in Australia. Like I said, I think we have an idea in our head, but it's really just we're all playing telephone and hoping for the best.
Right. Yeah, anything that you call pure, I mean, for the most part, can be called into question. Like, how do you know? I mean, it may look like a Northern, but what happened to that bloodline 20 years ago in the U.S.?
Yes.
So there was a lot of crossing that was going on in the 80s, and conversations with Ron as far as how species were bred back in the day. When all this was beginning, is very different than what occurs now. So
yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I didn't interrupt. I was going to say, it's sure at some point we'll probably have some kind of genetic testing, but it's going to probably take somebody in the community to do it because the reality is there'll never be the funding there. It'll be like a pet project for somebody to go through with it because the species isn't mainstream enough to put that kind of money into it.
Correct. Yeah, it would be cost prohibitive to do that for the most part.
But on a species standpoint, though, to determine what they were, you'd need, like northern DNA from Australia and be able to. You can't just test the ones here and believe that it's a northern. You got to get quality starting DNA.
Correct.
It would all have to happen in Australia. The test would have to be designed in Australia, and then it would have to be sent here when they actually figured it out for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, Dave, when are you going to move to Australia and do it?
Oh man! As soon as I burn at both ends in this country, and I got to run somewhere, and I think Australia's the place to be. But I still think I'll end up in Costa Rica when shit hits the fan, if that makes any sense. But I'm sure somebody will have some northern blue tongues down there for me to work with.
Something. Oh.
Well, what do you think, Bud?
What's that?
Oh, on your potential pregnant females, do you offer any special supplementation or diet or whole quail or?
Yeah, so I just pay more attention to my supplement routine to make sure that I'm 100% on point with that. I pay a little bit more attention to that for all the species that I work with, but I offer a wide variety year round. So, I'm preparing them in late summer, early fall for the following year. So it's not just about when I believe that they're carrying. So it's kind of a year round thing for me. I try to make sure I'm on point year round. I pay a little bit more supplementation, obviously during this time, because she's going to be utilizing, more nutrients to produce the babies, but
This one might be hard to know. How much more calcium do you think a pregnant female needs?
I personally don't know. To me, it's just gut feeling. I go on how I feel, which is what I've always done with all the species that I work with. If you look at for example, my bearded dragon eggs, I get contacted all the time and asked why they always look so perfect in white. Because a lot of breeders have, a lot of windowing. They're not opaque. They're very translucent. They have a ton of windows in them, and mine are always like these little pearly whites. And that's just from keeping my nutrition on point. So do I occasionally get one with windowing? Of course. But do I see many of them? No, not at all. So it's just kind of more, I go off of gut feel. And then try to always provide the highest quality ingredients I can as far as in what I'm offering them. So like the eggs I offer, for example, cost a freaking fortune, but like I want to get some of the quail eggs. I actually have a friend that's producing them locally, but I use the pasture raised organic eggs. I don't use the cheap eggs just because like I've noticed that the color of the yolk is completely different. The thickness of the shell is completely different. Like it's a different nutrient content. So it's more nutrient dense when you're using like a true pasture raised organic egg over, the eggs that you can find for whatever they are now, a dozen. They used to be $1 a dozen and now they're not. So, but so anyway, I try to work with higher quality, across the board. I do a lot of organic, a lot of stuff that's grown here. So, I've like my dragons and the bananas, they're eating cactus that's grown here, hibiscus that's grown here. So weeds that are grown, that grow out in my yard. We don't use any pesticides. So there's certain weeds that offer antimicrobial, like the stinging nettle. So is really good for keeping like parasites and things like that in check. So I don't know. I just try to look at the big picture rather than just meat.
Are you ever incorporating snails into their diet?
I have done some snails. I haven't done any recently. I need to find a good source for them locally. So that was something that I would like to do more of.
All right. You guys have apple snails are pretty invasive down there, right? Or is that the southern part of the state or throughout the state?
South of here. Yeah, they are down south.
Right.
They're not. They're
I
not.
don't know enough about it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I didn't know if there was like any toxins you'd have to worry about them if you're like collecting them in these ponds and rivers down there. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, for the snails, I would not feel comfortable feeding something that I was collecting or paying somebody to collect. It would be more of a food grade. I would feel more comfortable. So when I fed them in the past, then they've been, offered at the Asian markets, not somebody that's picked them up from wherever. So that I would be uncomfortable with that personally.
So I don't want to burst your bubble, but I used to go to these auctions in Buffalo to buy rabbits, and there was a guy from a Chinese restaurant buying chickens and rabbits. I'm sure your snails might have came from the creek down the road from your house, and you just don't know it.
That's possible. Yeah, which is why I haven't done it recently. And I said I kind of wanted to, I don't know if there's the idea of feeding snails appeals to me. The idea of what could happen from feeding snails does not appeal to me. So I end up like, I'm a little bit more, obviously I don't want anything to happen to my animals. So
No, I think you should be cautious. I think anybody in the community knows we've had issues in the past with food. We've had animals that have not done well because of it. So, there's a learning curve. You got to do something wrong to figure out how to do it right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like I said, I have fed snails, but I don't feel super comfy with it.
I got that.
What about frozen snails? What about frozen or?
I honestly haven't done the homework on that yet. I honestly haven't really explored all of my options to see what's out there, how safe is it, what is the risk, so on and so forth. Obviously I know that if I can find snails that are, clean, that would be of great benefit to them since that's part of their natural diet. But I honestly have not done the deep dive on that yet. So.
Because like the Asian market here, and they're already pre-packaged, they're frozen, wild-caught apple snails that are cooked and then frozen. So I would think between both it would kill everything, but I don't
not
know.
necessarily. I'm going to say no on that one.
Yeah. We don't even know how important snails are. We know they enjoy them. I don't know if that's more of a treat, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I know as far as like a source of calcium, that would be really good for them. But I feel like I offer them a lot of variety already right now. I feel like I am, they do not have just, a mundane diet of me popping a can. I'm doing a lot of extra for them. And I feel comfortable with what I'm doing right now. So, like I said, would I like to add the snails to the program? So.
I like how we all stopped to read that.
Yeah, right?
I guess I should have read out loud. The Roger commented that the original Northern Whites were very dirty in color, and the ones that are pure white have been created using Easterns.
Interesting.
So what about pattern? Lack
We'd
of
have
pattern
to
or is that just completely variable? Like, for example, the zero in the bearded dragon, it strips all pattern, it strips all color, but some of them are born with a bit of pattern, and then as they develop and grow, the pattern is gone. The pattern vanishes. So, but initially when they're born, when they hatch, a lot of them will have some pattern, and then it vanishes over time. It seems like the ivory does the same thing. It just strips everything out.
I think some keep it though, the color. I believe it was Manny had
have a little bit of a pattern. Yeah.
Yeah, that would remain.
And some of the zeros will have a little bit of a pattern remaining as well, but for the most part.
I think Ty Parkin posted a picture of a ivory years ago, and I remember it had a lot of banding, a lot of yellow, and I had wondered whether or not that might have been Eastern influence. I wouldn't have thought the other way around.
I've seen some overseas that had some color remaining also, so I don't know if they maybe even work to try to improve that.
I don't
But
know.
now they have the pied, so they might give up on that anyway.
So the Northern White is a project, considering you're going to get a animal that doesn't have much going on. Do you think there's ever a way that we might be able to make them better? Like, do you think reds will create pink pigment? Do you think blacks will do anything in it? Like, do you think, is it the ceiling, or do you think there's a way to build on that without putting other true mutations into it?
The ivory?
Yeah.
I don't know. From what I understand, it sounds like from what I've been told, it sounds like it basically strips everything. It strips everything that you do with it. But if it stripped truly everything, then no pattern would remain under, pretty much it seems like there is some variability there. So, like you mentioned, there's some yellow in some of them have some pink. So because there's a trace of something, it makes me think, we might be able to, you might be able to enhance that. You might be able to build upon that. But I have no idea. It's just something that we're going to have to get in there and see. I mean, I certainly have no experience with it. This is the first year that I'm, obviously working with the ivories, so I have no idea. Maybe somebody will chime in on the the comments once it hits YouTube and can enlighten us and provide some more information. I just don't know. So, I mean, I have 4 of them, and I plugged them in differently, and we'll see what hits, see what I get this first year, and see what everybody else gets, and keep going. So
I mean, that's one thing I haven't incorporated into my projects yet. I always wanted them. I got a little discouraged when everybody got them, but there could be some potential there, but I don't really know how to look at the project yet.
Yeah, I think we're going to find that it's going to be, for the most part, a white skink, and that there's going to be very little we can do with it, much like the zero and the dragon. But I don't know that definitively. Nobody's said to me, "Hey, that's it. This is all you can do with this project." So, and because we do see some that do have some pattern, we do see some that have traces of color, then that doesn't exclude it entirely. I would say if all of them were pure white and there was no variability, then that was that. But I mean, we do see a little bit out there. So
you guys might know this because I don't. What do the hets look like? Is there a lot of variability in the hets like everything else? Is there something that's like markers in the hets?
Not that I've seen.
I've not seen a het.
I've seen pictures that people shared, but nothing in person or enough that I could notice.
Yeah, I saw photos of some of babies at one of the expos. It was one of the expos in California, but nothing like. But that was some time ago. That was before, and nothing stood out at that time to see if there was anything like a marker or anything like that where you were able to indicate it. And the zeros, for example, in the bearded dragon, the pattern is like kind of pixelated in the hets. And so it's kind of, the pattern gets kind of washed out as the animal gets older. So I was kind of curious if that happened in the hets for the ivory as well.
Yeah. Well, just kind of discussing maybe,
but they seem to be very similar.
Okay. The reason I ask is like building on projects like, in boa constrictors, you have the fire boa that makes the leucistic. Leucistic might be a dead end, but the fire boa is almost like an enhancer. In ball pythons, the special ball pythons become a very hot topic lately. It makes a very vibrant animal as long as you don't try to make a white snake with it. So I was kind of curious if the hets had something about them that maybe we can line breed that to make a nicer animal and not just strive for a white animal.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we're all being a little too greedy because we just got this like 5 minutes ago and we're already trying to figure out how to make it better.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah. Like all of us are sitting in year one, well, most of us are sitting at year one of it and just already.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now I'm just kind of like, let's just see what comes on the ground, what shows up on the ground from what I've done this year, and go from there. So, and see where I want to take it from there.
I agree with that.
Well, it kind of seems like, people have been striving for years to get a solid white animal. Now you get solid white and you want to change it.
Yeah.
No, I like a solid white animal, but just like I like the melanistic. So
Yeah.
if it can't be changed, then no problem. But if you can enhance it or you can use it as a booster, then
No, and I don't think it's necessarily greed to look into the future, try to figure out what ingredients we have to make better animals.
No, it's just a wonder, you're just kind of dreaming, like what's next, what's possible, that's part of the excitement of it all. What's possible? What can we do with this? What can this become? How would it change by plugging this into this? So, it's fun.
And the joke back in the day, and I'm sure you remember, is that a white animal within a species was almost like the holy grail. Like everybody wanted that pure white version, whatever they worked with. And nowadays, just with, again, where the hobby's at, people look at a white animal like whatever. But again, hognose people, and they got their white hognose finally, man, did they love that fucking thing. It might have been a dead end, but man, they wanted them.
So back to the zero. The zero is the same thing. The zero and the bearded dragon has been unbelievable. The price has remained stable on that project for so many years. It's insane. Price is adjusted on any other mutation, but the zero is still holding strong, as far as like both wholesale and retail price point. They're still in very high demand. It's crazy. So yeah, they definitely, the bearded dragon community was all about a white animal. The hypo zero the zero itself is like a gray, but the hypo zero is white. And I still have people every day. Do you have any hypo zeros? Do you have any hypo zeros? Do you have any, so, I mean, it's trailing off a little bit now. But that mutation has been in production for 12 years, I think, maybe 12 years.
So you guys haven't really overproduced for the demand. Is there any issues with that project that kind of like made it to where you guys haven't overproduced, or is the demand just that high? Are we allowed to talk about this?
So are we allowed to? Oh, of course. So with the zeros, the best cross to produce them has been the head-to-head. So visual to visual, the results are not so great. The animals don't thrive. You see more neuro issues in them, more growth issues. So a lot of us that are producing them, like I only pair head-to-head with them. So obviously that's going to reduce the number of visuals that you're producing, since each egg has a 1 in 4 chance of being a visual, obviously. So that's kept production numbers down. Some people have done the visual to het and said that their results have been okay. I personally have not done it. I didn't really see the need to. And I have a tendency to err on the side of caution whenever I feel like something may negatively impact the health of the offspring. So
I understand that. Ooh, I don't want to be this guy, but Alex, have we set that 2-hour mark you were hoping for? You want to keep pushing? Because I think we said 2 hours. It's not the guy.
Yeah, we are. I don't know if you have a wrap-up question at all, or otherwise we could. I think Heather answered most of everything. Yeah, I mean, what else could we do to grow the community is about the only other thing, but we kind of briefly talked on that.
Yeah. I think that's just naturally building up steam on its own. I see, I'm in some of the groups. I'm quiet though, just because I'm like that anyway on social media. My inbox is busy, but I'm pretty quiet as far as online. I don't post in the groups much, but I do see a lot of information flowing, and it seems like I think there's more information that's being shared, and and I think that'll continue to grow. I think there's a lot of people involved in the blue tongues now that want to share information and that are excited about it, and that, that want to share what they've done and their successes and failures and this, that, and the other. I think that you doing this podcast is fantastic, because prior to this, if you try to bring up podcasts for blue tongues, there's almost nothing out there. There's very little out there. There's been a few sporadic, that have occurred, but I don't see, let's see, the white northern.
Yeah, Roger said the yellow comes from the eastern lineages.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought the one animal I'm speaking of did have like an eastern vibe too because of the yellow, but again, the size of the rest of them made me think that again it was either heavy inbreeding or now eastern blood.
Maybe both.
Maybe both. No, and I think like one advantage that you're really going to have, in my opinion, is the fact that you've worked with other species. You have people that have seen you be successful with those, and when they see you be successful with these, I'd be surprised if they don't want them. Even Ron's experience in the hobby working with monitors, other lizards, other species, I think that's going to honestly be a real driving force in the hobby the next couple of years for new people wanting to work with them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, bridging the gap in other species.
Yeah, that's I agree. I'm just excited about it. I'm very excited about it. It's been a long, when you have a plan in mind, and you have your future, your next, what you see, and it's kind of like at the end of the tunnel, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm working on it, and these last few years have just been like a tremendous amount of work, and the number of dragons that I was still producing while slowly building the blue tongues on the side. And so this has been a very exciting process for me, and I'm really happy with where it's gone. And I look forward to plugging into the community more than I have. Like I said, I've been kind of doing my own little thing on the side, and looking forward to getting to know people a little bit better, and what your experience has been, and your successes and your failures, and what you've learned. And, hopefully people can learn from me as well. Obviously, I've taken a lot of my knowledge from other species that I've worked with, and plugged them into the blue tongues, and how I work with them. And then, I have the outdoor perspective, which is different than a lot of people producing them indoors. So, keeping outdoors has helped me be a better keeper indoors, because I view things a little bit differently, seeing them outside, and a yearly, all through the seasons, you learn a tremendous amount about animals that you wouldn't know just by keeping them indoors. So anyway.
Yeah. Nope, I agree with everything you said. And like you said, I really think our best years are ahead of us. This species has been around for about 30 years now, and I've seen more movement forward in the last 7. So in the next 7 years, I think there's going to be new faces. I do think that we're going to start expanding to new communities. I think it just takes a diverse group of breeders that know other people to get new people into it. Yeah.
Agree.
Well, thank you for coming on, Heather.
Thank you.
You have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. You guys do the same.
I have your links in the description for anyone that wants to get a bearded dragon or blue tongue or a bit of other species you guys have.
We have a lot going on here.
Yeah.
We stay busy.
I know all our babies are coming pretty soon. I really hope we get a chance to do this again, maybe in like 4 months, and we have more to talk about too.
Exactly. That would be great. Fingers crossed for all of us, definitely. So I'm wishing all of us success, and everybody out there that's listening, if you're working with blue tongues, I wish you success as well this season. And hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of information. So, I definitely look forward to it. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and good night, everyone.